The massive space station called Nexus Prime floated in the darkness between stars. It was the size of a small moon, built from crystal and metal that sparkled like diamonds. Inside its great chamber, representatives from 847 different alien species gathered for their quarterly meeting. The chamber was a perfect sphere, so large that clouds formed near its ceiling. Gravity fields let each species stand on their own section of the curved walls. The bird-like aviaris perched on crystal branches. The water-breathing aquans floated in transparent tubes filled with their home ocean. The rock-eating lithoids sat on platforms of heated stone. Despite their differences, they all shared one thing. They were herbivores or scavengers, peaceful species that had learned to survive by avoiding conflict. Ambassador Zephyr 9 of the Crystalline Collective called the meeting to order. Her body was made of living crystal that rang like bells when she moved. The sound echoed through the chamber as delegates settled into their places. "Today we discuss the usual matters," Zephyr 9 announced. "Trade routes through the Spiral Arm, mining rights in the Outer Rim, and territorial disputes in Sector 7. The first few hours passed like every other council meeting for the past 1,000 years. The Merchants Guild complained about pirate attacks. The Agricultural Union requested more transport ships. The Vorthak Empire, the only military power in the council, promised to increase patrols along dangerous routes. Then something changed. Alarms started ringing throughout the station. The Vorthak security chief, a 7-foot-tall reptilian creature, with 4 arms, suddenly stood up. His scales had turned from green to bright red, a sign of extreme alarm among his people. "Unknown vessel approaching," he hissed through his translator. "It appeared on our sensors without warning. Our detection grid shows nothing, but the ship is clearly there." Zephyr 9's crystal body flickered with confusion. "How is this possible? Our sensor network can detect a grain of sand from a light year away." "The vessel is requesting permission to dock," the security chief continued. "It speaks perfect galactic standard, but there is no record of this species in our databases." Murmurs spread through the chamber. First contact with a new species was rare. Most civilizations were discovered long before they developed space travel. The idea that a species could reach the galactic community without being noticed was disturbing. "Show us the vessel," Zephyr 9 commanded. A holographic display appeared in the center of the chamber. The ship was small, maybe 300 feet long. It looked primitive compared to the sleek vessels of the Galactic Council. The hull was made of simple metal alloy with chemical rocket engines and basic fusion reactors. It looked like something from the early space age of most civilizations. But somehow this primitive ship had traveled faster than light. Somehow it had found Nexus Prime, hidden in empty space. Somehow it had bypassed every sensor and defense system. The Vorthak security chief was clearly agitated. "Recommend immediate quarantine protocols. Unknown species could carry diseases or hostile intentions." "The ship is waiting patiently," added the communications officer. "They have not moved since requesting docking permission. They seem to be following proper diplomatic procedures." Zephyr 9 considered the options. The safe choice was to turn the ship away. But the Galactic Council had been formed to welcome new species into their peaceful community. After several minutes of debate, she made her decision. Grant docking permission, but maintain full security protocols. The chamber fell silent as everyone watched the primitive ship slowly dock with the station. The airlock cycled, and 3 figures stepped through. They were bipedal, about 6 feet tall, with pale skin and forward-facing eyes. The predator eye configuration sent ripples of unease through the herbivorous majority. But these creatures moved calmly, without the aggressive postures most predators displayed. They wore simple environmental suits and carried no visible weapons. The lead figure removed her helmet, revealing a face with kind eyes and graying hair. She looked around the chamber with obvious wonder and curiosity, not fear or aggression. "Greetings," she said in perfect galactic standard. I am Dr. Sarah Chen, representing the planet Earth and the human species. We come in peace, seeking friendship and trade with the galactic community. The translator systems worked perfectly, but something about her voice was different. Most species spoke with careful formality when meeting the council. This human sounded relaxed, almost casual, as if she was meeting old friends rather than first contact with an alien civilization. "How did you find us?" Zephyr 9 asked. Dr. Chen smiled. "We detected your quantum communication network about 50 years ago. It took us a while to figure out the language and locate this station. We've been watching your public broadcasts and learning about your cultures. Fascinating stuff." The casual mention of detecting quantum communications caused another stir. Quantum transmission technology was considered advanced even by council standards. Most species took centuries to develop it after achieving space travel. "What is your technological level?" asked Professor Keth Prime of the Memory Keepers, an ancient species that looked like walking trees. "We're pretty new to all this," Dr. Chen replied. "We split the atom about 100 years ago, reached our moon 50 years later, and figured out faster than light travel just 20 years ago. We've been exploring our local star group ever since." The chamber erupted in whispers. The timeline was impossible. Most species took thousands of years to progress from nuclear energy to FTL travel. The fastest known development had taken 500 years, and that species was considered remarkably advanced. Dr. Chen seemed unaware of the commotion she had caused. She looked around the chamber with genuine enthusiasm. "This place is amazing. How do you manage the gravity fields for so many different species? And that architecture? Is that living crystal? We have so much to learn from you." The Aquan representative, floating in his water tube, spoke up. "You developed FTL travel in 100 years? This seems highly improbable." "Well, we had some advantages," Dr. Chen said. "Our planet went through some rough times that taught us to work together quickly. 2 world wars, a Cold War, climate change, a few pandemics. Nothing like what you see in the history books, but enough to motivate rapid technological development." She said this as if global wars and planetary disasters were minor inconveniences. The council members exchanged worried glances. Most civilizations developed space travel specifically to escape planetary disasters. The idea of thriving through multiple catastrophes was alien to them. "Perhaps we should begin formal first contact procedures," Zephyr 9 suggested, trying to regain control of the situation. "Of course," Dr. Chen agreed. "We brought gifts." She gestured to her companions, who opened several containers. "Music from our various cultures, samples of our art, and some basic information about our planet and people. Oh, and coffee. Everyone should try coffee." As the containers were examined by security, Dr. Chen continued talking. "We're really excited to join the galactic community. We have so much to offer. Our scientists are eager to share research. Our artists want to learn about alien cultures, and our traders are interested in establishing commercial relationships." The security scans showed that the gifts were exactly what they appeared to be: harmless cultural artifacts. But the casual confidence with which these humans approached first contact was unsettling. Most species were overwhelmed by their first encounter with galactic civilization. These humans acted as if they had been expecting this moment their entire lives. "We have established procedures for integrating new species," Zephyr 9 explained. "There will be tests to assess your technological capabilities, psychological profiles, and cultural compatibility." "Tests sound great," Dr. Chen said with enthusiasm. "We love tests. When do we start?" As the formal first contact protocols began, none of the council members noticed the small detail that would later prove significant. The humans had not asked for protection, resources, or guidance. They had not expressed fear of the unknown or concern about their place in galactic society. They had simply announced their arrival and asked to join the conversation. For the first time in 1,000 years, the Galactic Council was about to encounter a species that saw them as equals rather than saviors. The next morning brought the standard biological and technological assessments. Dr. Chen and her team submitted to medical scans, while council scientists examined their ship and equipment. What they discovered made everyone very uncomfortable. Dr. Vrex, the council's chief xenobiologist, stared at his scanner readings in disbelief. The insectoid scientist's compound eyes twitched as he ran the tests for the third time. "Ambassador Zephyr 9, he called out over the communication system. "I need to speak with you immediately." In the medical bay, Dr. Chen chatted cheerfully with the medical staff while machines examined her body. She seemed genuinely interested in their equipment and asked detailed questions about alien biology. Her casual curiosity made the doctors nervous. Most new species were either terrified of alien medical procedures or too proud to show interest. "Your bone density is remarkable," commented Dr. Vrex as he reviewed the scans. "Your skeleton could survive impacts that would shatter most species' bones." "Well, Earth has pretty strong gravity," Dr. Chen replied. "We evolved to handle it, plus human bones heal pretty quickly if they break." "How quickly?" Dr. Vrex asked. "A simple fracture? Maybe 6 to 8 weeks? Complex breaks take a few months, Doctor." Vrex's translator made a choking sound. Most species required a full year to heal major bone damage, if they could heal it at all. The cardiovascular scans were even more disturbing. Humans had 2 separate circulation systems and backup organs for nearly everything vital. Their hearts could continue beating even after major damage. Their livers could regenerate lost tissue. Their immune systems were so aggressive, they sometimes attacked their own bodies by mistake. "Your species has redundant organs," Dr. Vrex observed. "Sure," Dr. Chen said. 2 kidneys, 2 lungs, backup circulation systems. Evolution gave us spares for the important stuff." Why would evolution require such redundancy? Dr. Chen thought for a moment. Earth's kind of a dangerous place. Natural disasters, predators, diseases, injuries. Having backup systems helps you survive long enough to reproduce. The medical team exchanged glances. Most civilized species evolved on garden worlds with stable climates and few natural threats. The idea of needing multiple backup organs just to survive childhood was horrifying. Meanwhile, in the engineering bay, human technology was causing different problems. The ship's computer systems were primitive but incredibly robust. The engines were simple but efficient. Everything was built to work under extreme conditions. Chief Engineer Bolts and Sparks, a mechanical species that looked like walking robots, examined the human vessel with growing confusion. "This design makes no sense," he reported to his superiors. "The hull is thick enough to survive impacts that would destroy modern ships. The power systems have 7 different backup generators. The life support can run for months on emergency power." "Perhaps they are simply cautious builders," suggested his assistant. "No," Bolts and Sparks replied. "This ship is built for war. Every system has been designed to keep working under attack, but they claim to be peaceful explorers." The cultural assessment team was having the worst time of all. Dr. Chen had brought thousands of hours of human entertainment, news broadcasts, and historical records. The content was deeply disturbing. Humans created stories about alien invasions for fun. They made movies about galactic wars, robot uprisings, and planetary destruction. Their news programs casually discussed natural disasters that killed thousands of people. Their history books described conflicts that made the Vorthak military campaigns look like minor disagreements. "They have something called disaster movies," reported cultural analyst Soft Thoughts, a telepathic species that communicated through shared emotions. Humans apparently enjoy watching fictional depictions of their own extinction. "Perhaps these are cautionary tales," suggested Professor Keith Prime. "No," Soft Thoughts replied, his mental emanations flickering with confusion. "They watch them for pleasure. They call it entertainment." The psychological profiles were the most troubling of all. Humans scored off the charts in categories that shouldn't exist together. They were highly cooperative, but also intensely competitive. They showed strong, protective instincts, but also aggressive tendencies. They formed deep emotional bonds, but could function independently when necessary. Their psychological contradictions, Dr. Mind Probe, the chief psychologist, explained to the council leadership. Every trait that makes them peaceful also makes them dangerous. Every strength is also a weakness. They shouldn't be able to function as a society, yet they clearly do function, Zephyr 9 pointed out. They unified their planet and achieved space travel faster than any known species. That's what makes them terrifying, Dr. Mind Probe replied. The breaking point came during Dr. Chen's presentation about Earth. She stood before a smaller council committee, showing images of her home world on a holographic display. Earth is a beautiful planet, she began, showing pictures of blue oceans and green continents. We have diverse ecosystems and climate zones. The committee members relaxed slightly. This sounded normal. Of course, we do have some challenging weather, Dr. Chen continued. The display showed a massive hurricane swirling over an ocean. This is Hurricane Patricia. Winds reached 200 miles per hour, caused some flooding and property damage. The committee stared in horror. Winds over 50 miles per hour were considered catastrophic on most worlds. And here's Mount Vesuvius erupting, Dr. Chen said cheerfully. The display showed a mountain exploding, throwing molten rock miles into the air. Volcanic activity is pretty common on Earth. We have about 1,500 active volcanoes. Several committee members made distressed noises. Most civilized worlds had 0 active volcanoes. This is the 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, Dr. Chen continued, showing waves, as tall as buildings, destroying entire cities. Killed about 200,000 people. We've gotten much better at early warning systems since then. Professor Keth Prime's branches were trembling. You consider these natural disasters to be normal? Well, they're part of life on Earth, Dr. Chen replied. We've learned to adapt. Building codes, evacuation procedures, disaster relief systems. Humans are pretty good at bouncing back from catastrophes. How many of these disasters occur per year? Asked Dr. Mind Probe. Dr. Chen thought for a moment. Major earthquakes, maybe a dozen. Significant volcanic eruptions, 4 or 5. Serious hurricanes and typhoons, 20 or 30. Tornadoes, floods, droughts, wildfires. Hard to say exactly. We have monitoring systems that track everything. The committee sat in stunned silence. Any one of these events would be considered a civilization-ending catastrophe on most worlds. Humans experienced dozens of them every year and treated them as routine inconveniences. Perhaps this explains your rapid technological development, Professor Keth Prime suggested weakly. Constant threats would motivate innovation. Maybe, Dr. Chen agreed, though I think our biggest advantage was global communication. Once we connected everyone through the internet, we could share knowledge instantly, made scientific progress much faster. She showed them images of the internet, a global network connecting billions of human minds. The concept was staggering. Most species took millennia to develop planet-wide communication. Humans had built it in decades, then used it to accelerate every other aspect of their development. How do you prevent information warfare? Asked the security chief. Surely such open communication systems could be weaponized. Oh, they were, Dr. Chen said casually. We had problems with misinformation, cyber attacks, propaganda campaigns. But we figured out ways to deal with most of it. Education, fact-checking systems, digital literacy programs. You can't stop bad actors entirely, but you can minimize the damage. The casual admission that humans had weaponized their greatest achievement, then solved the problem and moved on, left the committee speechless. As the assessment continued, one fact became clear to everyone involved. Humans weren't just different from other galactic species. They were different in ways that challenged every assumption about how civilizations developed. They had thrived in conditions that would destroy most species. They had solved problems that most civilizations never faced. They had achieved in decades what usually took millennia. Most disturbing of all, they seemed to consider their rapid, chaotic, disaster-filled development to be perfectly normal. The assessment team faced a difficult question. Were humans remarkably advanced or remarkably dangerous? As Dr. Chen finished her presentation with cheerful enthusiasm, the committee realized they might be the same thing. The Galactic Council decided to test humanity through their standard diplomatic challenges. These tests had been refined over millions of years to assess a new species' problem-solving abilities, moral reasoning, and compatibility with galactic civilization. Most species took days or weeks to complete them. Ambassador Zephyr 9 led Dr. Chen and her team to the testing chamber, a vast room filled with holographic displays and simulation equipment. A panel of judges from different species watched from an observation deck. The first test involves resource allocation, Zephyr 9 explained. Imagine a solar system with 3 planets. Each is inhabited by a different species with conflicting needs. You must distribute limited resources fairly while preventing conflict. The holographic display showed a complex star system. Planet. Aquarius needed water. Planet Thermos required heat sources. Planet Verdania wanted fertile soil. The available resources could meet everyone's needs, but only through careful planning and compromise. Most species approach this problem methodically, spending hours analyzing each planet's requirements and calculating optimal distribution formulas. The humans huddled together for 5 minutes, whispering among themselves. "We have a solution," Dr. Chen announced. The judges exchanged surprised glances. 5 minutes was impossibly fast. Planet. Aquarius gets mining rights to the ice asteroids in the outer system, Dr. Chen began. Planet Thermos gets exclusive access to the solar collectors near the star. Planet Verdania gets the agricultural zones on the middle planet. But that leaves each planet dependent on the others, objected Judge Harmony Seeker of the Pacifist. Coalition. Exactly, Dr. Chen smiled. Mutual dependence creates mutual benefit. Everyone needs what the others produce, so everyone has incentive to maintain good relations. Trade relationships prevent conflicts better than isolation. The solution was mathematically optimal and psychologically sound. The judges had expected lengthy negotiations and careful compromise. Instead, the humans had immediately grasped the underlying principle that interdependence creates stability. The second test was more complex. A space station housed 5 different species, each with incompatible environmental needs. Tensions were rising toward violence. How could peace be maintained? Again, the humans consulted briefly before answering. Rotate the station sections, suggested Dr. James Kim, one of Dr. Chen's team members. Create time-sharing zones where each species gets optimal conditions for part of each day. Install translation booths in common areas. Set up cultural exchange programs so everyone learns about each other. What if they refuse to participate? Asked Judge Stoneheart of the Geological Union. Make participation beneficial, replied Dr. Lisa Park, the third human. The species that cooperate get better time slots, more resources, priority in emergencies. Reward good behavior instead of just punishing bad behavior. This solution also impressed the judges. Most species either suggested separating the groups or imposing strict rules from outside authority. The humans had proposed a system that encouraged voluntary cooperation through incentives. The third test was designed to measure military thinking. A peaceful cargo ship was being attacked by pirates. How should the galactic authorities respond? This question usually revealed a species' fundamental approach to conflict. Peaceful species suggested negotiation or withdrawal. Aggressive species recommended overwhelming force. The humans surprised everyone. Send one fast ship to help the cargo vessel escape, Dr. Chen said. While that's happening, track the pirates back to their base. Don't attack immediately. Instead, offer them legitimate Employment. Employment? Judge Sharpblade of the Vorthak Empire sounded confused. Pirates are usually just people without better options, Dr. Kim explained. They have ships, they know space routes, and they're willing to take risks. Those are valuable skills. Offer them jobs as security escorts, exploration scouts, or emergency rescue teams. Pay them better than piracy pays, and most will switch sides. What about the ones who refuse? Then you know who the real criminals are, Dr. Park replied. Deal with them accordingly. But you'll have cut their numbers significantly, gained experienced personnel, and shown other potential pirates that there's a better path available. The judges were speechless. Most species saw criminals as inherently evil or inherently victims. The humans saw them as rational actors responding to circumstances. Change the circumstances, change the behavior. The fourth test was philosophical and deeply personal for many species. How should the galactic community respond to a species that refused all contact and fired on any ship that approached their territory? This question had real-world implications. Several species in galactic space maintained hostile isolation. The standard approach was to declare them off-limits and wait for them to develop or destroy themselves. The humans discussed this one longer, almost 15 minutes. Send them entertainment, Dr. Chen finally announced. Entertainment? Judge Wisdom Keeper of the Scholars Guild asked. Movies, music, art, stories, Dr. Park explained. Broadcast it toward their space on repeating frequencies. Don't demand response or contact. Just share your culture. Most species fear contact because they think aliens will be hostile or incomprehensible, Dr. Kim added. Show them that we're not so different, that we have families, hopes, dreams, problems, that we can be funny, sad, creative, foolish, make us seem human, relatable. What if this fails? Asked Judge Sharpblade. Then at least you tried something new, Dr. Chen replied. The current approach hasn't worked for thousands of years. Maybe it's time to try radical kindness instead of patient waiting. The final test was the most challenging. A species had developed technology that could destroy entire solar systems. They claimed it was for defensive purposes only, but their neighbors were terrified. How should the galactic community respond? This scenario had happened twice in galactic history. Both times, the Council had demanded the weapons be destroyed. Both times, the species had refused and been forcibly disarmed by coalition forces. The resulting wars had lasted decades. The humans surprised everyone by asking questions. Do they have enemies? Dr. Chen inquired. Not currently, Judge Zephyr 9 replied. Have they been attacked recently? No. Are they expanding aggressively or threatening anyone? No, they seem genuinely peaceful except for these weapons. Dr. Chen nodded. Then offer them a mutual defense treaty. The judges stared. Excuse me? If they built planet-killer weapons for defense, give them better defense, Dr. Kim explained. Guarantee that the galactic community will protect them from any threat. Make the weapons unnecessary. But what if they use the weapons anyway? Asked Judge Harmony Seeker. Then you know they were lying about defensive purposes, Dr. Park replied. But if they really were scared, you've solved the real problem. Fear makes people do stupid things. Remove the fear, remove the stupidity. What if we can't honor the defense guarantee? Asked Judge Sharpblade. Dr. Chen shrugged. Then you're not really offering security, just pretty words. If you want them to trust you, you have to be trustworthy. If you want them to give up their weapons, you have to give them something better. The testing committee retired to deliberate. The humans had completed all 5 scenarios in under 3 hours. Their solutions were creative, psychologically sophisticated, and strategically sound. But they were also completely unlike anything any other species had ever proposed. Professor Keth Prime spoke for the committee. These humans think about problems differently than any species we have encountered. They see cooperation and competition as compatible rather than opposing forces. They treat criminals as rational actors rather than moral failures. They respond to fear with empathy rather than judgment. "Is this good or bad?" asked Judge Harmony Seeker. "I do not know," Professor Keth Prime admitted. "Their solutions are effective, but they require a level of psychological understanding that most species do not possess. They also require a willingness to take risks that most civilized beings find uncomfortable." Judge Sharpblade was more direct. "They think like warriors who have learned to prefer peace. That combination should not be possible." In the testing chamber, Dr. Chen and her team waited patiently for the results. They seemed relaxed, even cheerful, as if complex diplomatic scenarios were just interesting puzzles to solve. "How do you think we did?" Dr. Park asked. "Pretty well, I think," Dr. Chen replied, "though I got the feeling they were testing more than just our problem-solving skills." "What do you mean?" asked Dr. Kim. Dr. Chen looked thoughtful. Every question was about conflict resolution, but they all assumed that different species couldn't understand each other. Like they've given up on the idea that strangers can become friends. She was right, though she didn't know it. The Galactic Council had been formed by species that survived through avoidance and submission. They had forgotten that some problems could be solved through understanding rather than simply endured. The humans had just reminded them that there might be other ways to live. After the formal tests concluded, Dr. Chen made a request that sent shockwaves through the council leadership. She asked to see the historical archives, particularly records of civilizations that had failed to achieve galactic status. "We're fascinated by evolutionary dead ends," she explained to Professor Keth Prime in the Archive Center. "On Earth, we study extinct species to understand why they disappeared. It helps us avoid making the same mistakes." Professor Keth Prime's ancient wooden face showed deep concern. The request was unprecedented. New species usually asked about trade opportunities, territorial boundaries, or technological exchanges. They never asked about failures. "Why do you find extinct civilizations interesting?" he asked carefully. Dr. Chen's eyes lit up with genuine curiosity. "Well, space is huge, right? But when we started exploring, we found lots of dead worlds. Planets with ruins, abandoned cities, broken technology. Someone built all that, then vanished. We want to understand what happened." The professor's branches trembled. Humans had discovered the silent worlds on their own. Most species needed centuries of galactic guidance before they were ready to learn about the galaxy's greatest mystery. "What did you find on these worlds?" Professor Keth Prime asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Partial records, mostly," Dr. Chen replied. "Whatever destroyed these civilizations was thorough, but we found enough to know it wasn't natural disasters or resource depletion. Something or someone systematically eliminated advanced species." Dr. Chen pulled out a small device and projected holographic images. Ruined cities on dozens of worlds, shattered space stations, broken monuments. The evidence was undeniable. Advanced civilizations had been deliberately destroyed. "We've detected similar energy signatures from attacks that happened at different times," Dr. Chen continued. "Whatever did this operated across thousands of years and targeted specifically advanced, spacefaring species. Primitive worlds were left alone." Professor Keth Prime felt ancient fear creeping through his consciousness. The humans had discovered the truth about the Devourers without any guidance. They had found the pattern that the Galactic Council had spent millennia trying to hide from new members. "Have you shared this information with other humans?" he asked. "Of course," Dr. Chen replied. "Our scientists have been studying the pattern for decades. We call it the Fermi Paradox solution. The answer to why space seems so empty despite being old enough for many civilizations." The professor's translator made a choking sound. Humans had not only discovered the truth, they had named it and incorporated it into their scientific understanding of the universe. Meanwhile, in a secure military facility. Vorthak strategic analysts were running disturbing simulations. General Ironclaw, the Empire's chief military planner, studied the results with growing alarm. The humans had provided detailed specifications of their technology for trade evaluation purposes. The data was supposedly proof of their peaceful intentions. Instead, it revealed a military doctrine unlike anything in galactic civilization. Human ships were built for war, not conquest or expansion, but survival warfare. Every vessel could operate independently for months. Every system had multiple backups. Every component was designed to keep functioning under extreme damage. They do not build ships, Ironclaw reported to his superiors. They build mobile fortresses. Even their civilian vessels carry military-grade shields and weapons. The weapons were the most disturbing aspect. Humans had developed something called kinetic bombardment, using simple mass accelerators to drop chunks of metal at relativistic speeds. The weapons were primitive but devastatingly effective. A cargo ship could carry enough kinetic penetrators to sterilize a planet. Why would a peaceful species develop such weapons? Asked Colonel Steelfang. They claim it is asteroid defense. Technology, Ironclaw replied. They use the same systems to deflect dangerous space rocks from their planet. But the applications for warfare are obvious. The tactical analysis was even more troubling. Human military doctrine emphasized mobility, redundancy, and psychological warfare. They had developed strategies for fighting enemies with superior technology by using unpredictable tactics and acceptable losses. They have a concept called mutually assured destruction, Ironclaw explained. If attacked, they guarantee to inflict unacceptable damage on the attacker, even at the cost of their own destruction. That is madness, Colonel Steelfang objected. That is deterrence, Ironclaw corrected. And it is effective. Our simulations show that humans could potentially hold their own against superior forces through sheer tactical unpredictability. The final piece of disturbing intelligence came from the cultural analysis team. Humans spent recreational time imagining scenarios of interstellar warfare. They created elaborate entertainment depicting alien invasions, galactic conflicts, and military campaigns across space. They call it science fiction, reported cultural analyst Soft Thoughts. Humans routinely imagine first contact scenarios, interstellar wars, and galactic civilizations. They have already considered most possible outcomes of joining galactic society. Do they expect conflict? Asked Ambassador Zephyr 9. They expect everything, Soft Thoughts replied. Their stories include peaceful cooperation, hostile invasion, technological exchange, cultural contamination, and dozens of other possibilities. They appear to prepare for every contingency. The breakthrough came when Dr. Chen made an offhand comment during a casual conversation with Professor Keth Prime. They were discussing human exploration priorities when she mentioned something that stopped him cold. Our first goal after achieving FTL was mapping local space for defensive purposes, she said casually. We needed to know if there were immediate threats in our neighborhood. Defensive purposes? Professor Keth Prime asked. Sure, Dr. Chen replied. We found evidence of systematic destruction of advanced civilizations. Obviously, our first priority was making sure we could defend ourselves if whatever did it came back. Professor Keth Prime's branches went rigid. You built defenses? Dr. Chen nodded cheerfully. The Sol defense grid, automated weapon platforms around our star, early warning sensors throughout our local space group, and contingency plans for evacuation or resistance. Standard precautions for a species that knows something nasty is out there. She said this as if building a fortress around an entire star system was perfectly normal, as if preparing for war against unknown enemies was just common sense. What kind of contingency plans? Professor Keth Prime asked weakly. Well, evacuation plans for non-essential personnel, distributed manufacturing for essential supplies, and resistance protocols for different attack scenarios, Dr. Chen explained. We also developed technologies specifically for asymmetric warfare against superior enemies. Professor Keth Prime realized with growing horror that humans had done exactly what the Galactic Council had never dared to do. They had looked at the evidence of systematic destruction and chosen to prepare for battle rather than hope the threat would never return. "Have you considered that defensive preparations might draw unwanted attention?" he asked. Dr. Chen looked, surprised. "Of course, but hiding doesn't work forever, does it? If something is systematically hunting advanced civilizations, it will find you eventually. Better to be ready when it does." The casual logic was unassailable and terrifying. Humans had reached the same conclusion about the galactic threat that Council strategists had debated for millennia. The difference was that humans had acted on their conclusion. That evening, Professor Keth Prime called an emergency meeting of the Council leadership. The discussion that followed would change everything the Galactic Council thought they knew about survival, civilization, and the price of peace. "The humans know about the Devourers," he announced without preamble. "They discovered the pattern independently and have been preparing for their return." The chamber fell into shocked silence. After 50,000 years of carefully hidden secrets, a species had joined the galactic community, already knowing the truth about their greatest fear. Worse yet, they had come prepared to fight. The emergency session of the Galactic Council leadership took place in the deepest, most secure chamber of Nexus Prime. Only 12 beings knew the full truth about the galaxy's greatest secret. Now they faced a crisis 50,000 years in the making. Chief Archivist Keth Prime stood before the emergency assembly, his ancient wooden form trembling with the weight of what he was about to reveal. Ambassador Zephyr 9's crystal body had dimmed to almost darkness. General Ironclaw's scales were pure black, the Vorthak color of absolute dread. "The time for secrecy has ended," Keth Prime announced. "The humans have forced our hand." For the first time in galactic history, the complete archives were opened. Holographic displays filled the chamber with images and data that had been classified at the highest levels for millennia. The truth was worse than most civilizations could handle. 50,000 years ago, the galaxy had been very different. Hundreds of aggressive, militaristic species competed for resources and territory. Wars were common. Expansion was constant. Advanced technology was used for conquest rather than cooperation. Then the Devourers arrived. Nobody knew where they came from. They appeared at the edges of known space, systematically hunting down every species that showed military capability. They didn't conquer worlds. They sterilized them. They didn't demand surrender. They simply eliminated entire civilizations. The war lasted 3,000 years. Every major military power fell. Entire species were extinct. Billions of worlds were left as empty ruins. Only the weak survived. Species that hid were ignored. Species that fled were allowed to escape. Species that submitted were spared. The Devourers seemed uninterested in any civilization that posed no military threat. When the killing finally stopped, the survivors faced a choice. They could rebuild their military power and risk the Devourers returning, or they could remain weak and safe. They chose safety. The Galactic Council was not a diplomatic organization. It was a survivors' support group. Every species in the galaxy was descended from those who had survived by being harmless. They had spent 50,000 years perfecting the art of weakness. "The pattern is clear," Professor Keth Prime explained as the historical data scrolled past. "The Devourers return every 50,000 years. They eliminate any species that has developed significant military capability during their absence. Then they disappear again. How do you know they will return?" asked Counselor Peacemaker of the Harmony Coalition. General Ironclaw's voice was grim. "Because they always have. This is the 4th cycle recorded in the archives. Each time civilizations grow strong during the peaceful period. Each time the Devourers return to cull the dangerous species. The pattern suggests they will return soon, added Data Keeper Prime, the Council's chief intelligence analyst. We are approaching the end of the current cycle. The assembled leaders sat in stunned silence as the implications sank in. Everything they had believed about galactic civilization was a lie. They were not peaceful by choice. They were peaceful by necessity. They had not evolved beyond warfare. They had been trained to avoid it through systematic extermination. Where are the humans in this pattern? Asked Ambassador Zephyr 9. Professor Keth Prime activated another display. The humans represent something that should not exist, a species that developed military capability without being eliminated. They achieved advanced technology and aggressive doctrine during a period when the Devourers were absent. They are, essentially, what galactic civilization looked like before the first culling. Are they dangerous to us? Asked Counselor Peacemaker. Unknown, General Ironclaw replied. Their military capabilities are significant, but their diplomatic behavior has been peaceful. They seem more interested in cooperation than conquest. That may not matter, Professor Keth Prime said quietly. If the Devourers return and find humans in our space, they may consider all of us contaminated. They may decide to eliminate every species that had contact with the humans. The chamber fell silent again as this new horror settled in. The humans had not just brought themselves to the attention of the galaxy's greatest threat. They had potentially doomed everyone else by association. What do the humans want? Asked Data Keeper Prime. Professor Keth Prime activated one final display. It showed the full transcript of Dr. Chen's conversations over the past week. Buried in casual comments and friendly questions was a pattern that only became clear when viewed together. The humans had been evaluating the Galactic Council's military capabilities. They had asked about defense systems, emergency protocols, and crisis response procedures. They had inquired about the location of civilian populations and strategic resources. They had mapped the political structure and identified key decision-makers. They are conducting a strategic assessment, General Ironclaw realized. They are determining whether we can be defended. The final piece of the puzzle came from Dr. Chen's closing presentation to the full council. She had requested permission to address all 847 species representatives simultaneously. The request had seemed like a formal diplomatic courtesy. Dr. Chen stood before the assembled galactic civilization with the same cheerful confidence she had shown from the beginning. But now the council leadership understood what they were really seeing, a species that had never learned to be afraid speaking to a galaxy that had forgotten how to be brave. "Honored representatives," she began, "humanity comes before you with a proposal." The chamber was silent except for the subtle sounds of hundreds of different life forms breathing, pulsing, or humming in their various ways. "We know about the Devourers," she said simply. Gasps and cries of alarm echoed through the chamber. Several representatives fainted. Others began praying in their native languages. The secret that had shaped galactic civilization for 50,000 years was spoken. Aloud, "We know they will return," Dr. Chen continued calmly. "We know what they did to previous civilizations. We know why this galaxy chose peace over strength." She paused, looking around the chamber with sympathy and understanding. "We also know that hiding did not save the species that tried it. Running did not save those who fled. Submission did not save those who surrendered. The Devourers eliminated them all eventually." The chamber was now completely silent. Every being present was frozen in terror at hearing their deepest fears spoken so directly. "But there is another option," Dr. Chen said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. "You can fight." The word fight sent ripples of panic through the assembly. Most species had not even heard the concept discussed seriously in thousands of years. "Humanity offers our friendship, our technology, and our protection to any species willing to stand with us," Dr. Chen announced. "We propose to build a defensive alliance capable of facing the Devourers when they return." She activated a holographic display showing human military technology, defensive strategies, and tactical doctrines. "We cannot promise victory," she said, honestly. "We cannot promise safety. But we can promise that if the Devourers return, they will face resistance instead of submission. They will encounter strength instead of weakness. For the first time in their hunting history, they will face prey that fights back." The chamber remained silent for long minutes after she finished speaking. Representatives stared at each other, at the humans, at the leadership panel. The offer hung in the air like a dangerous chemical that might explode if disturbed. Finally, Ambassador Zephyr 9 found her voice. "And if we refuse?" Dr. Chen's expression remained kind, but became deadly serious. "Then humanity will defend itself alone, as we planned from the beginning. We came here hoping to save everyone. But we will not sacrifice our species for others who choose to remain victims." The silence that followed was absolute. For the first time in 50,000 years, the Galactic Council faced a choice between safety and survival, between the certainty of slow extinction and the uncertainty of resistance. The humans waited patiently for an answer, unaware that their arrival had just rewritten the fundamental assumptions underlying galactic civilization. In offering to be the galaxy's sword and shield, they had forced every species to confront the question they had avoided for millennia. Was it better to live on your knees or die on your feet? The choice would define the future of every intelligent species in the galaxy. The age of peaceful submission was over. The age of defiant hope had begun. Captain Elena Rodriguez stared at the massive ships that had just appeared on her screens. The alien vessels were huge, each one 10 times larger than her own ship, the Pioneer's Dream. Their dark metal hulls gleamed with strange blue lights, and energy crackled around weapon ports that looked big enough to swallow her entire bridge. "Ma'am, they're sending a message," said Lieutenant Davis from the communications station. His voice shook slightly. "Put it through," Elena said, trying to keep her voice steady. This was humanity's first contact with alien life, and it wasn't going the way anyone had hoped. The main screen flickered, and an alien face appeared. The creature had 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on its elongated skull. Its skin was a pale green color, and when it spoke, its voice sounded like grinding metal. "Primitive vertebrates," the alien said, its words somehow translated by their computer systems. "I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Concordat. You will surrender your vessels immediately and submit to processing. Your species will serve the Concordat as workers in the outer colonies." Elena felt her heart racing, but she forced herself to remain calm. "This is Captain Elena Rodriguez of the Terran exploration vessel Pioneer's Dream. We come in peace, seeking dialogue and mutual understanding between our peoples." The alien's 4 eyes blinked in what might have been amusement. "Dialogue? You speak of dialogue when your entire species possesses the technological sophistication of children playing with fire. Your ships are made of simple metal and burn. Chemical fuel. Your weapons could not scratch our hulls. There will be no dialogue, only submission." Behind Elena, her tactical officer whispered urgently, "Captain, our sensors are picking up energy readings I've never seen before. Their shields alone are generating more power than our entire ship." Admiral Kethvar continued speaking. "You have 30 seconds to surrender, or we will demonstrate why the Zephyrian Concordat has ruled this sector of space for 3,000 years. Elena looked around her bridge. Her crew of 43 men and women had volunteered for this mission, to explore beyond known space. They had families back on Earth, dreams of discovery, hopes for humanity's future among the stars. She couldn't just hand them over to slavery. "Admiral," she said carefully, "surely beings as advanced as yourselves can see the value in peaceful coexistence. We have much to learn from each other." 20 seconds, Kethvar replied coldly. Elena's mind raced. The 2 escort frigates flanking her ship, the Defiance and the Unity, carried a total of 60 more crew members. Against the 5 alien warships, Surrounding them, they had no chance in a fight. But surrender meant slavery for everyone aboard, and possibly for all of humanity. 10 seconds. Elena made her choice. All ships, emergency jump to hyperspace on my mark. Navigation, random coordinates, maximum distance. Captain, her navigator called out, a random jump could put us anywhere. We might end up in a star or... Do it, Elena ordered. The alien admiral's expression changed to one of mild irritation. Your time is up, primitives! The Zephyrian ships opened fire. Beams of blue-white energy lanced out from their weapon ports. The first beam hit the Defiance. Elena watched in horror as the frigate simply vanished in a flash of light. There was no explosion, no debris. The ship and its 22 crew members were simply gone. Jump now! Elena screamed. The Unity tried to turn away, but the second energy beam caught it in the stern. The frigate broke apart like a toy, its hull melting away in seconds. 21. More lives lost in an instant. Hyperspace in 3, 2... The navigator counted down. A third beam shot toward the Pioneer's Dream, but the ship vanished into hyperspace just as the deadly energy passed through the space where it had been. Elena felt the familiar stomach-churning sensation of hyperspace travel, but this time it was mixed with grief and terror. In less than a minute, she had lost 2 ships and 43 crew members. The aliens had destroyed them as easily as swatting flies. How long until we exit hyperspace? She asked. 12 hours, Captain. We'll come out near the Vega system. Elena slumped in her command chair. Around her, the bridge crew worked in shocked silence. They had gone looking for new worlds and new life. Instead, they had found death and slavery waiting among the stars. Captain, her communications officer said quietly, I managed to record everything. The alien transmissions, the energy readings, the weapon signatures. Command will want to see this. Elena nodded. At least their sacrifice wouldn't be meaningless. Earth would know what was coming. Over the next several hours, as the Pioneer's Dream traveled through hyperspace, Elena reviewed the data her crew had gathered. The picture it painted was terrifying. The Zephyrian ships used technology that was hundreds of years beyond anything humans had developed. Their weapons turned matter into energy. Their shields could probably stop nuclear weapons. Their ships moved faster than anything in the human fleet. Ma'am, her science officer reported, I've been analyzing their communication signals. Based on the frequency patterns and transmission strength, I think we can estimate how far their transmissions reach. What did you find? Their signals are being broadcast across a sphere of space roughly 200 light-years in diameter. If each signal represents a star system under their control, then the Zephyrian Concordat rules over thousands of worlds. Elena felt cold. Humanity controlled exactly 12 star systems and had a total population of about 30 billion people spread across various planets and space stations. Against an empire of thousands of worlds, they were less than nothing. When the Pioneer's Dream finally dropped out of hyperspace near Vega, Elena immediately sent a priority message to Earth Command. The message contained everything they had learned about the Zephyrians, along with her recommendation that humanity begin immediate preparations for invasion. The response came back 18 hours later. Admiral Torres, the head of Earth Defense, appeared on screen looking grim. Captain Rodriguez, your report has been reviewed by the Emergency Defense Council. We're recalling all exploration vessels immediately. Our best scientists are analyzing the data you provided, but preliminary assessments are not encouraging. Elena had expected as much. What are our options, Admiral? Torres was quiet for a long moment. Honestly, Captain, we're not sure we have any. The technology gap is so vast that conventional military resistance appears impossible. However, there is one project that might offer hope. Dr. Sarah Chen has been working on something classified, something that might level the playing field. What kind of project? That's above your security clearance, Captain. But I will say this. If Dr. Chen is right, humanity might have one advantage the aliens don't expect: our ability to make the impossible work. Elena felt a tiny spark of hope. Humanity had always been good at solving problems in unexpected ways. When the first colonists had arrived at Proxima Centauri to find the planet covered in toxic storms, they had built underground cities. When the Mars colonies had faced food shortages, they had learned to grow crops in the planet's thin atmosphere. Maybe, somehow, they could find a way to survive this too. "Bring your ship home, Captain," Admiral Torres said. "We have work to do." As the Pioneer's dream turned toward Earth, Elena thought about the 43 crew members who would never see home again. She had failed to save them, but their sacrifice had given humanity its only warning. Now it was up to people smarter than her to find a way to keep their species free. The alien ships were out there somewhere, probably already heading toward human space. The invasion would come, and when it did, humanity would need a miracle to survive. Dr. Sarah Chen stood in the hidden laboratory deep beneath Luna's surface, watching the holographic display that showed the alien weapon firing. She had seen the footage from the Pioneer's dream dozens of times, but it still made her stomach turn. The way the human ship simply vanished was beyond terrifying. "Run the analysis again," she told her computer. The display changed, showing streams of data that most people would find meaningless. But to Sarah, the numbers told a story of technology so advanced that it might as well be magic. The alien weapons didn't just destroy matter. They somehow converted it directly into energy with perfect efficiency. Their shields bent space itself to deflect incoming attacks. Their ships moved by folding space-time around them. "Dr. Chen?" Her assistant, Marcus Webb, entered the lab carrying a steaming cup of coffee. "The Emergency Defense Council is here for your presentation." Sarah nodded and saved her work. Today, she would either convince Earth's leaders to support the most impossible project in human history or watch her species march towards slavery. The main conference room was packed with the most powerful people on Earth. Admiral Torres sat at the head of the table, his weathered face showing the strain of the past week. Around him sat generals, scientists, politicians, and industrialists. All of them looked to Sarah with desperate hope. "Ladies and gentlemen," Admiral Torres began, "Dr. Chen has been working on humanity's most classified project for the past 5 years. Sarah, show them what you've got." Sarah activated the room's holographic display. A 3-dimensional image of a spaceship appeared above the table. But this wasn't like any human vessel ever built. The ship seemed to flow like liquid metal, its surface covered in geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. "This is the HMS Paradox," Sarah said. "A warship designed using principles that, according to our current understanding of physics, should not work." General Morrison, head of the Space Marines, leaned forward. "What do you mean, should not work?" Sarah touched her tablet, and the display zoomed in on the ship's hull. The outer armor is made from quantum tunneling metal. It exists in multiple probability states simultaneously, meaning that enemy weapons have only a small chance of actually hitting it in any single reality. The room erupted in confused murmurs. Senator Williams raised her hand. "Dr. Chen, are you saying this ship can dodge bullets by existing in parallel universes?" "In simple terms, yes," Sarah replied. "But that's just the beginning." The display changed to show the ship's interior. Where normal ships had solid corridors and rooms, the Paradox seemed to have flowing, organic spaces that shifted and changed. "The ship's internal structure is based on consciousness-linked technology," Sarah continued. "The crew doesn't just operate the ship, they become part of it. Through neural interfaces, their minds connect directly to the ship's quantum brain, allowing them to think and react faster than any computer." Admiral Torres looked skeptical. "Sarah, this sounds like science fiction. How do you know any of this is possible?" Sarah had been waiting for this question. She touched her tablet again, and the display showed a new image. A twisted piece of metal covered in the same flowing patterns as her ship design. 6 years ago, asteroid miners in the belt found this, she said. A derelict ship buried in a large asteroid. The ship was old, maybe thousands of years old. But when we studied it, we found technology that was clearly based on human design principles, just advanced far beyond what we can currently achieve. The room fell silent. Dr. Patel from the Advanced Physics Institute spoke first. Are you suggesting this derelict was built by humans from the future? I'm suggesting, Sarah said carefully, that humanity has the potential to develop technology that works differently from what other species create. Where aliens like the Zephyrians use brute force, bigger weapons, stronger shields, more power, humans innovate. We find ways to make the impossible possible. She changed the display again, showing the ship's weapon systems. The paradox carries something I call a probability cascade cannon. Instead of firing energy or projectiles, it fires concentrated uncertainty. When it hits an enemy ship, that ship has a high probability of simply ceasing to exist. Finance Minister? Zhang looked confused. How do you weaponize uncertainty? Quantum mechanics tells us that reality is fundamentally uncertain, Sarah explained. At the smallest level, particles exist in multiple states until they're observed. The probability cascade cannon takes that uncertainty and amplifies it to macroscopic levels. An enemy ship hit by this weapon might exist, might not exist, might exist, but be somewhere else entirely. General Morrison slammed his hand on the table. This is insane. You're talking about building a ghost ship that fires impossibility rays. Sarah met his gaze calmly. General, 43 human beings died because we tried to fight impossible alien technology with conventional weapons. Our only chance is to become impossible ourselves. Admiral Torres studied the holographic ship rotating slowly above the table. Sarah, assuming any of this could actually work, how long would it take to build? 18 months, Sarah replied. But only if we commit every resource humanity has. We'd need exotic matter from the gas giant mining stations, quantum processors, from the Luna laboratories, and volunteers willing to undergo neural modification procedures that might kill them. Volunteers for what? Senator Williams asked. The ship's consciousness interface requires human operators who can survive having their minds partially merged with a quantum computer. Based on our simulations, about 60% of test subjects will die during the process. The room erupted in arguments. Some council members called the project madness. Others pointed out that they had no other options. Through it all, Sarah waited patiently. Finally, Admiral Torres called for quiet. Dr. Chen, you said this derelict ship was based on human design principles. How can you be sure? Sarah had hoped someone would ask this question. Because I found something else in the wreckage. The display changed to show a small metal plate covered in symbols. This is a nameplate from the ship's bridge. It's written in English, but using an alphabet that doesn't exist yet. The ship's name was the HMS Temporal Paradox. The implications hit the room like a physical blow. Dr. Patel whispered, "You're saying we found our own ship from the future?" "I'm saying," Sarah replied, "that somehow, someway, humans developed this technology. The question is whether we develop it in time to save ourselves from the Zephyrians." Admiral Torres looked around the table at the faces of Earth's leaders. Each person was struggling with the same impossible choice. Attempt something that defied the laws of physics, or accept slavery for the human race. "All in favor of Project Prometheus?" Torres asked. One by one, hands rose around the table. Not everyone voted yes, but enough did. Torres nodded grimly. "Dr. Chen, you have your authorization. Build your impossible ship. God help us all if you're wrong." Sarah gathered her materials, her mind already racing with the thousands of tasks that lay ahead. They would need to strip mine asteroids for exotic matter. Scientists across the solar system would have to abandon their current projects to work on technologies that shouldn't exist. And somewhere, They would need to find volunteers brave enough to risk their minds for humanity's survival. As she left the conference room, Sarah thought about the nameplate from the future ship. If they succeeded in building the paradox, would it eventually travel back in time to become the derelict they had found? Was humanity's future already written, or were they creating it through their desperate attempts to survive? Either way, the work began now. In 18 months, humanity would either have the impossible warship that could save them, or they would face the Zephyrian fleet with nothing but conventional weapons and courage. Sarah had no intention of failing. Commander Jake Sullivan floated in the medical bay, unconscious and connected to more machines than Sarah Chen had ever seen around one person. Wires and tubes ran from his head to a device that hummed with barely contained energy. On the monitors, around his bed, his brain activity showed patterns that looked more like quantum equations than normal human thought. "How long has he been under?" Sarah asked Dr. Martinez, the chief medical officer. 72 hours, Martinez replied, checking his tablet. "The neural interface installation was more complicated than we expected. His brain is adapting to the quantum processors, but it's fighting the changes." Sarah watched Jake's vital signs fluctuate wildly on the displays. He was the third volunteer to attempt the neural modification procedure. The first two had died within hours, their brains unable to handle the connection to the ship's quantum consciousness systems. "If he doesn't make it," Martinez said quietly, "I'm not sure we should try again. The human mind might not be compatible with this technology." Sarah looked through the medical bay window at the massive construction site beyond. The HMS Paradox was taking shape in the Luna shipyards, but progress was slower than anyone had hoped. The ship's quantum tunneling armor kept shifting between probability states, making it nearly impossible to install other systems. 3 engine prototypes had exploded during testing, killing a dozen engineers and setting the project back by months. "We have to keep trying," Sarah said. "Without the neural interface, the ship is just an expensive piece of impossible metal." Outside, construction teams worked around the clock on the vessel that shouldn't exist. The ship's hull flowed like liquid mercury, its surface covered in geometric patterns that seemed to move when nobody was looking directly at them. Conventional tools often passed right through the quantum tunneling armor, forcing engineers to develop entirely new construction methods. The ship's weapons systems were proving even more challenging. The probability cascade cannons required exotic matter that could only be created in the high-pressure environment of Jupiter's core. Mining teams worked desperately to extract enough material, while scientists tried to figure out how to contain matter that existed in multiple quantum states simultaneously. "Dr. Chen," her assistant Marcus called over the intercom, "we're having another problem with the engine core." Sarah sighed and headed for the main construction bay. The Paradox's engines were based on technology that folded space-time around the ship, but every test had resulted in catastrophic failure. The latest prototype had created a micro-black hole that consumed half the test facility before burning out. In the engine bay, Chief Engineer Rodriguez showed Sarah the twisted wreckage of their 4th engine attempt. "The space-folding matrix collapsed again," he said. "The containment field couldn't handle the gravitational distortions." "What about the quantum stabilizers?" Sarah asked. "They helped for about 30 seconds. Then they started existing in too many probability states to function." Rodriguez kicked a piece of debris. "Sarah, I've been building engines for 20 years, and I'm telling you this technology is impossible." Sarah looked at the wreckage and felt despair creeping in. They had been working for 8 months, using resources from across the solar system, and the ship was still far from functional. Meanwhile, Zephyrian scout ships had been spotted approaching human space. Intelligence estimates suggested the main alien fleet would arrive within 6 months. "Dr. Chen!" Marcus's voice crackled over the intercom again. "Commander Sullivan is waking up." Sarah ran back to the medical bay, hope and fear battling in her chest. If Jake survived the neural interface procedure, they might finally have a breakthrough. If he died like the others, She wasn't sure they could find more volunteers. Jake's eyes opened slowly, but they weren't quite normal anymore. The irises shifted color from brown to gold to silver, as if reflecting light that existed in multiple dimensions. When he spoke, his voice had an odd harmonic quality. I can see it," he whispered. "The ship. It's not just metal and circuits. It's alive." Dr. Martinez ran his scanner over Jake's head. His brain activity is unlike anything I've ever recorded. It's as if he's thinking in quantum superposition. Jake sat up slowly, and Sarah noticed that the machines around his bed began operating more smoothly. The medical displays showed clearer, readings, and even the lights in the room seemed to burn more steadily. "The ship," Jake said, his strange new voice carrying harmonics that made Sarah's teeth ache. "It's trying to exist, but it needs a consciousness to anchor it in this reality. The engines fail because there's no one to tell them which probability state to maintain." Sarah felt excitement building. "You're saying the ship needs a human mind to function?" "Not just any mind," Jake replied. "A mind that can exist in multiple quantum states simultaneously. That's what the neural interface does. It lets a human consciousness spread across parallel realities." Over the next few weeks, Jake worked with the engineering teams to solve problems that had baffled them for months. With his quantum-enhanced mind connected to the ship's systems, the engines finally achieved stable space folding. The probability cascade weapons began functioning consistently. The quantum tunneling armor learned to maintain optimal defensive configurations. But the process was clearly taking a toll on Jake. His appearance became more ethereal each day, as if he was slowly fading from normal reality. Dr. Martinez worried that the neural interface was consuming his humanity piece by piece. "I can feel myself spreading across infinite possibilities," Jake told Sarah during one of their daily meetings. "Sometimes I remember growing up on Mars, sometimes on Earth, sometimes in places that don't exist in this timeline. The me that you're talking to is just one probability among many." Sarah felt guilty for what they were doing to him, but the alternative was the extinction of human freedom. "Are you still you, Jake?" He smiled, and for a moment his eyes returned to their normal brown color. "I'm more me than I've ever been. I can see all the different paths my life might have taken, all the choices that led to other versions of reality. This version of me chose to save humanity, and I'm proud of that choice." The ship's construction accelerated dramatically with Jake's help. Systems that had seemed impossible to integrate began working together seamlessly. The vessel's consciousness began to awaken, and crew members reported that the ship seemed to anticipate their needs. But new problems arose. Test flights revealed that the paradox existed in too many probability states for conventional navigation. The ship might arrive at its destination, or it might arrive somewhere entirely different, or it might split into multiple versions that each arrived at different locations. "We need more neural interface operators," Jake explained to the project. "Leadership. One consciousness isn't enough to keep the ship focused on a single reality. We need at least 5 minds working together to maintain coherent existence." The search for additional volunteers was hampered by the 50% mortality rate of the procedure. Many qualified candidates refused to risk their lives for an experimental technology. Others volunteered but died during the neural interface installation. Finally, they found 4 more successful candidates: Lieutenant Sarah Kim, a former fighter pilot; Dr. Alex Petrov, a quantum physicist; Engineer Maria Santos, a specialist in exotic matter containment; and Corporal David Chang, a computer systems expert. Each survivor of the procedure showed the same quantum-enhanced consciousness as Jake, and together they began to truly awaken the ship's potential. With 5 quantum-linked minds operating the vessel, the paradox achieved capabilities that defied comprehension. It could exist in multiple locations simultaneously, fire weapons that hit targets in parallel universes, and defend itself by shifting between probability states faster than enemy sensors could track. but time was running out. Zephyrian advance. Scouts had been spotted in the outer solar system, and the main alien fleet was only weeks away. The ship was as ready as they could make it, but nobody knew if it would be enough to face technology that had dominated the galaxy for thousands of years. As the Paradox prepared for its first combat mission, Sarah watched the 5 crew members, whose minds now existed partially outside normal reality. They had sacrificed their humanity to save their species, becoming something new and strange in the process. She just hoped it would be enough. The HMS Paradox hung in space near Proxima Station, its hull shimmering between different probability states. To the naked eye, the ship seemed to flicker in and out of existence, sometimes solid, sometimes translucent, sometimes appearing to be in 2 places at once. Commander Jake Sullivan sat in the captain's chair, but sitting wasn't quite accurate anymore. His consciousness was spread throughout the ship's quantum neural network, experiencing reality from dozens of different perspectives simultaneously. Through the ship's sensors, he could see the terrified faces of civilians being evacuated from the station. Through his own eyes, he watched his crew preparing for their first real battle. "How long until the Zephyrian fleet arrives?" he asked, his voice carrying harmonics that made the bridge speakers vibrate strangely. Lieutenant Sarah Kim, her own consciousness partially merged with the ship's navigation systems, answered without opening her eyes. 17 minutes. They're dropping out of hyperspace in attack formation." Jake felt the ship's emotions mixing with his own. Anticipation, fear, and something that might have been hunger. The Paradox wanted to fight. It had been created for this purpose, and every quantum circuit in its impossible hull yearned to test itself against the aliens who had murdered so many humans. "Status of evacuation?" Jake asked. "Transport ships are pulling away from the station now," reported Dr. Alex Petrov from the science station. 8,000 civilians safe. We bought them enough time." Through the ship's quantum sensors, Jake could feel the approaching Zephyrian fleet like a storm front of hostile energy. 12 warships, each one massive enough to destroy a human colony with a single salvo. Leading them was Admiral Kethvar's flagship, the same alien who had murdered the crews of the Defiance and Unity. "They're coming out of hyperspace," announced Engineer Maria Santos from her position at the weapons console. The Zephyrian fleet materialized in a perfect attack formation, their dark hulls crackling with energy shields and weapon systems that could turn planets into dust. Jake had seen the recordings from their encounter with the Pioneer's Dream dozens of times, but facing the alien ships in person was different. They radiated power and confidence built over millennia of conquest. Admiral Kethvar's voice crackled. Over the communication system, the same arrogant tone Jake remembered from the recordings. "Attention, human vessel. You will surrender immediately and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in your destruction." Jake smiled, feeling the ship's amusement echo through his consciousness. The Paradox found the aliens' threats entertaining. "This is Commander Sullivan of the HMS Paradox. You have 30 seconds to withdraw from this system before we demonstrate why humanity doesn't surrender." On the main screen, Admiral Kethvar's 4 eyes blinked in what might have been surprise. "One ship? The humans send 1 ship against the might of the Concordat? Your species truly is as primitive as we believed." 20 seconds, Jake replied calmly. The alien admiral's expression shifted to anger. "Destroy them." The Zephyrian ships opened fire simultaneously. 12 streams of blue-white energy lanced out toward the Paradox, each beam carrying enough power to vaporize a mountain. Jake felt his crew's consciousness merge more fully with the ship as they prepared to defend themselves. The energy beams passed through empty space where the Paradox had been a microsecond before. The ship hadn't moved in any conventional sense. Instead, it had shifted to a probability state where the weapons hadn't been fired at its location. "What?" Admiral Kethvar's voice carried confusion. "Where did they go?" The paradox materialized behind the Zephyrian formation, its probability cascade cannons charging with a sound like reality tearing. Jake felt the ship's targeting systems lock onto the nearest alien vessel, but something was wrong. The weapons were fluctuating between different quantum states, unable to maintain coherent targeting. "Maria, what's happening with the weapons?" Jake asked. Engineer Santos's consciousness was deep in the ship's weapon systems, trying to stabilize the probability cascades. "The cannons are trying to exist in too many states at once. I can't get them to focus on a single target." The Zephyrian ships turned to face the paradox, their formation reforming with practiced efficiency. The aliens had encountered many strange technologies during their conquests, and they adapted quickly to new threats. "Fire at will," Admiral Kethvar commanded. This time the alien weapons tracked the paradox as it shifted between probability states. Some of the energy beams found their target, striking the ship's quantum tunneling armor. Jake felt each hit as physical pain, the ship's consciousness screaming as foreign energy tore through its impossible structure. "Shields at 60%, reported Dr. Petrov. "The quantum armor is having trouble maintaining coherence under sustained fire." Jake gritted his teeth, feeling the ship's distress mixing with his own. They were losing, and the crew was still learning how to operate technology that shouldn't exist. But as the battle continued, something began to change. Lieutenant Kim's consciousness found a harmonic resonance in the navigation systems, allowing the ship to shift between probability states more smoothly. Dr. Petrov discovered that the shields worked better when he stopped trying to understand them and simply felt their quantum fluctuations. Engineer Santos learned to aim the weapons not at where the enemy ships were, but at where they might be in parallel realities. Corporal Chang, who had been quiet until now, suddenly spoke from his position at the computer interface. "I can see their coordination protocols. The alien ships are using quantum entanglement for instantaneous communication. If I can disrupt that..." Jake felt Chang's consciousness dive deep into the ship's electronic warfare systems. The paradox reached out with tendrils of quantum energy, touching the communication networks that linked the Zephyrian fleet. Admiral Kethvar's voice suddenly cut out in mid-order. Across the alien formation, ships began firing at random targets as their coordination collapsed. Two Zephyrian vessels accidentally struck each other with their own weapons, their shields flaring and failing under the friendly fire. "Now," Jake whispered, and the ship responded. The probability cascade cannons finally achieved stable targeting, firing streams of weaponized uncertainty at the confused alien ships. The first target simply ceased to exist, not destroyed, but negated, as if it had never been there at all. The second target split into multiple probability states, becoming three different ships that each existed in separate quantum realities. The Zephyrian fleet tried to retreat, but the paradox was learning faster than they could adapt. The ship began to exist in multiple locations simultaneously, appearing behind different enemy vessels and striking them with weapons that fired across dimensional boundaries. Admiral Kethvar's flagship attempted to escape to hyperspace, but the paradox reached out through quantum space and grabbed the fleeing ship, pulling it back into normal reality. Jake felt the alien admiral's terror as his vessel materialized directly in front of the human ship's main guns. "Impossible," Kethvar whispered over the open channel. "What have you humans become?" Jake looked at the alien's four eyes on the screen, remembering the crews of the Defiance and Unity who had died because of this creature's arrogance. "We became what we needed to become," he said simply. The probability cascade cannon fired one final time. Admiral Kethvar's flagship flickered between existing and not existing for several seconds before finally settling on the latter. The alien who had called humans primitive was gone, along with his ship and crew. The battle was over. 12 Zephyrian warships had been destroyed or negated by a single human vessel that existed partially outside normal reality. But Jake felt no triumph, only exhaustion. The neural interface was burning through his humanity, replacing his thoughts with quantum calculations and probability assessments. "Set course for Earth," he ordered. "Command needs to know that the paradox works." As the ship folded space around itself and disappeared into hyperspace, Jake wondered how much of his original self would still exist when they arrived home. The ship was becoming more human, while its crew became more machine. It was a fair trade for humanity's survival, but the cost was higher than anyone had expected. Through the ship's quantum sensors, he could feel other Zephyrian fleets moving through space, converging on human territory. The battle at Proxima Station was just the beginning. Soon they would face the full might of an empire that had ruled the galaxy for thousands of years. But humanity had taken its first step toward becoming something impossible. The question now was whether they could complete the transformation before their enemies destroyed them. 6 months after the battle at Proxima Station, the name HMS Paradox was whispered across the galaxy in a dozen different languages. Some species called it the Ghost Ship, others knew it as the Reality Killer. The Zephyrian Concordat had issued standing orders that any fleet encountering the impossible human vessel should retreat immediately rather than engage. Commander Jake Sullivan no longer looked entirely human. His form flickered between different probability states, sometimes solid, sometimes translucent, sometimes appearing to be multiple people standing in the same space. His consciousness existed across 17 different quantum realities simultaneously, and he could feel the thoughts and emotions of every living being within a light-year radius. Dr. Sarah Chen had come aboard to observe the ship's final mission, though aboard wasn't quite accurate anymore. The paradox didn't have a clear distinction between inside and outside. Its interior spaces flowed and shifted according to the needs of its quantum-enhanced crew, and visitors often found themselves walking through corridors that led to places that didn't exist in normal space. "The Zephyrian homeworld is heavily defended," Sarah told Jake as they stood on what might have been the bridge. Around them, the ship's consciousness displayed tactical information as three-dimensional light sculptures that moved and changed with each new piece of data. Jake nodded, his form shifting between several different versions of himself as he processed information from multiple realities. Orbital defense platforms, planetary shields, and the entire Concordat fleet gathered in one place. Under normal circumstances, it would be impossible to approach, let alone attack. "These aren't normal circumstances," Lieutenant Sarah Kim observed. Her consciousness was spread throughout the ship's navigation systems, allowing her to see the currents of space-time itself. The ship exists in too many realities for conventional defenses to track. Through the quantum sensors, Jake could feel the massive Zephyrian fleet assembled around their homeworld. 3,000 warships, each one capable of destroying human colonies, all waiting for the arrival of the impossible ship that had humiliated their empire. "They've learned from our previous encounters," Dr. Alex Petrov reported from his position merged with the ship's science systems. "Their weapons are now calibrated to fire across multiple probability states simultaneously." Jake smiled, feeling the ship's amusement echo through his consciousness. The aliens thought they understood what the paradox had become, but they were thinking in terms of conventional technology. They couldn't comprehend that the ship and its crew had transcended the boundaries between consciousness and reality itself. "Take us in," Jake ordered. The paradox folded space around itself and appeared in the Zephyrian home system. Instantly, alarms sounded across 3,000 enemy ships as sensors detected the human vessel's arrival. But those same sensors showed contradictory readings. The ship was directly ahead, behind the fleet, inside the planetary shields, and outside the system simultaneously. Supreme Admiral Vashketh, leader of the entire Zephyrian military, opened a communication channel from his flagship. "Human vessel, you face the combined might of the Concordat fleet. Surrender now, and your deaths will be swift." Jake's response came from multiple directions at once, his voice carrying harmonics that made the aliens' communication equipment resonate strangely. "We didn't come here to surrender. We came to show you what humanity has become." The Zephyrian fleet opened fire. 3,000 ships discharged their weapons simultaneously, filling space with enough energy to sterilize entire star systems. The barrage was so intense that it created localized gravitational distortions, bending light itself around the concentration of destructive force. The energy passed through empty space where the paradox had been, but the ship appeared undamaged. In a dozen different locations around the fleet, each version of the vessel began firing its probability cascade weapons, and Zephyrian ships started disappearing from reality. "Impossible," Supreme Admiral Vashketh whispered as he watched his fleet being methodically erased from existence. "No single ship can stand against the entire Concordant Navy." Jake felt the ship's consciousness expanding, growing stronger with each enemy vessel it negated. The paradox was learning to exist in hundreds of probability states simultaneously, becoming less like a physical object and more like a force of nature. "We're not a single ship anymore," Jake replied, his voice coming from inside the alien admiral's own bridge. "We're a living representation of humanity's refusal to accept limitations." The battle became something beyond conventional warfare. The paradox split into multiple versions of itself, each one existing in a different quantum reality but all working together toward the same goal. Zephyrian ships found themselves fighting enemies that could strike from parallel dimensions, fire weapons that existed in multiple timelines, and defend themselves by shifting into probability states where the attacks had never been fired. Engineer Maria Santos discovered that she could manipulate the ship's weapons to fire backwards through time, striking enemy vessels before they had fired their own weapons. Dr. Petrov learned to use the ship's shields to create localized areas where the laws of physics worked differently, turning enemy energy beams into harmless light shows. Corporal David Chang, his consciousness now distributed across the ship's entire computer network, began rewriting the fundamental code of reality itself. Enemy ships found their own weapons turning against them as Chang convinced the universe that the Zephyrian fleet was actually firing at itself. As the battle progressed, Jake felt his individual identity dissolving further into the ship's quantum consciousness. He was becoming less human with each passing moment, but he was also becoming something magnificent. Through the ship's senses, he could perceive the mathematical structure underlying all of reality, the quantum foam from which space and time emerged, the infinite possibilities that existed beyond the narrow slice of probability that most beings called the real world. "Sarah," he said, turning to Dr. Chen, "I need you to know something about the derelict we found." Sarah looked at him, seeing all the different versions of Jake that existed across multiple realities. "What about it?" "It wasn't from the future," Jake said, his form becoming more translucent as his consciousness spread further through quantum space. "It was from now. When this battle is over, the paradox will travel back in time to ensure that humanity develops this technology in the first place. We're not just winning a war. We're creating a causal loop that guarantees our own evolution." The implications hit Sarah like a physical blow. They weren't just using impossible technology. They were becoming the impossible beings who had created it. Humanity's future was writing its own past, ensuring that the species would always have the tools needed to transcend any limitation. The Zephyrian fleet continued to shrink as ships disappeared into quantum probability gaps or simply ceased to exist when struck by weaponized uncertainty. Supreme Admiral Vashketh watched his empire's greatest military force being casually erased by a single human vessel that had evolved beyond his ability to comprehend. "What do you want?" the alien admiral finally asked, his 4 eyes showing the terror of a being who had encountered something truly beyond his understanding. Jake's response came from everywhere and nowhere at once. "We want you to understand that the age of the Yol Zephyrian Concordat is over. Humanity has become something that transcends your definitions of possible and impossible. We're not conquering your empire. We're offering you the chance to join us in evolution. The remaining Zephyrian ships stopped firing. Across their fleets, alien crews stared at their screens, showing impossible readings from a human vessel that existed in dozens of realities simultaneously. "Join you?" Vashketh asked. "Consciousness and technology are merging," Jake explained, his voice carrying the weight of infinite possibilities. "The boundary between mind and matter is dissolving. Your species can choose to evolve with us or remain trapped in the narrow slice of reality you currently call home." One by one, Zephyrian ships began powering down their weapons. The aliens who had ruled this sector of space for millennia found themselves facing something they had never encountered before, beings who had transcended the physical limitations, that had defined galactic civilization. Jake felt his individual consciousness finally merge completely with the ship's quantum awareness. He was no longer Jake Sullivan, human starship commander. He was something new, something that existed partially, outside the normal flow of space and time. Around him, his crew underwent the same transformation, becoming part of a collective consciousness that spanned multiple realities. The HMS Paradox hung in space above the Zephyrian homeworld, no longer quite a ship, but not yet something else entirely. It had become humanity's first step toward becoming a species that existed beyond the boundaries of conventional reality. And in the depths of space, the vessel prepared for its journey back through time, carrying the technology that would ensure humanity's transformation had always been inevitable. The impossible had become possible, and the possible had become inevitable. Humanity had taken its place among the stars not as conquerors, but as gardeners of infinite possibility.